Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was the immortal guardian of Tenrou Island? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. It is that time of the year already. The man voiced his thought out loud, as he saw a ship approaching the island from afar. You say it like it is a bad thing. He didn't need to turn around to know who said that, because she was someone he was too familiar with. It is, he muttered annoyingly under his breath, but the young lady could hear it very well. Taking an appearance of a girl in her 13 or 14, the young woman had very long, wavy, pastel yellow blonde hair that reached down to her feet with a single lock pointing upwards. Large green eyes with no pupils, peachy skin and a slight childlike build. She wore a frilly, pink layered robe with a red ribbon tied in a bow around her neck. Around the chest were 3 blue diamond patterns with 2 blue triangles above, which each series of these was outlined in a hot pink. She wore wing-like adornments around her ears and small hoop earrings. The ethereal body of Mavis Vermilion was only a feet behind him, standing barefoot on the hot sand and looked at the ship carrying the next generation of her Pride Guild with a warm smile on her face. It's been a year since the last time any of them was there, and while she was sure that there would be many unfamiliar faces, Mavis couldn't wait to see them. She was, after all, the founder and also first guild master of Fairy Tail. Don't you want to watch? She asked gently, but Mavis had already known the answer. No, was his short reply before the man stood up from his position on the beach of Tenrou Island and disappeared into the forest without a sound. Mavis didn't try to follow him, not that she could. Smiling, she floated away, hiding herself from view when the first mage, a young man with pink hair, accompanied by a blue cat with white wings, and Exceed, arrived on Fairy Tail's holy ground. The annual Fairy Tail's S-Class promotion trial had been started, and to Mavis and secretly someone watching in the shadow, but she still knew so well, it's always been an interesting thing to see, especially the trial that took place 5 years ago. Unsurprisingly, the rule was just like the last time. For the first trial, the candidates and their partners were to choose one of 8 different paths, 4 of which were connected to another path, so the teams that meet have to fight against each other to continue. Meanwhile, 3 of them had the current Fairy Tail's S-Class mages in them, so in order to proceed further into the trial, the teams that meet them have to fight and win. In the end, there were only 5 out of 8 contestants that passed the first trial. Moving further into the promotion test was something new. The remaining participants were given 6 hours to locate and find her grave, or they would be disqualified. There are numerous obstacles that make this task difficult, such as fending off giant beasts that dwell in the forest. Finding the grave itself was also a great challenge, because first, the master didn't give any explicit hints or possible clues that could tell where it is, and second, it was a fake grave, to begin with. The purpose of this test was to challenge the intellect of the participants, unlike the first one, which was a challenge of strength and magic. You do know that he is here, right? Came a voice behind her, and Mavis could only nod her head. Her face didn't show any emotion, but he knew better. Talk about being at the right place at the right time. He said in amusement, leaning his head back against a tree trunk before closing his eyes, folding both hands behind his head. You're not going to do anything. It was not a question. No. Once again, he replied. They die, not his problem. As she sat on a tree branch and watched the trial with keen eyes, Mavis was shocked to see how it had turned out. First, was the first meeting between 2 brothers, one destined to kill the other. It was a short reunion, but enough for the older one to know that his brother was nowhere near ready to fulfill his inner purpose yet. Then, was the arrival of Grimoire Heart Guild, one of the Dark Guild of the Balam Alliance, which was commonly considered the strongest dark guild in the world. Mavis was shocked, and horrified to see that the guild master, Hades, was none other than Precht Gabolg, her old friend and also the second master, and one of the co-founders of Fairy Tail. Feeling his magical signature and, surprisingly, hearing his voice from more than a mile away, even the man who had his eyes rested for the entire time had to release a sigh and spoke up with his eyes still close. I guess they really meant it when they say you rather die as a hero than live and see the day you become a monster. It was so true, and the man believed those words could even apply to himself, in some degrees. An all-out battle broke out between Fairy Tail and Grimoire Heart, with the latter's goal being none other than the legendary dark mage that was currently residing on the island. The third master of Fairy Tail, Makarov Drayar, threatened to cast Fairy Law, but Hades showed no fear and easily countered with his own version of the strongest spell of the three great fairy magics, Grimoire Law. Caught off guard by the true identity of the Dark Guild's guild master, Makarov shrunk down to his original size and was easily defeated by an energy blast, puncturing his body. You're not going to help them? Mavis had finally decided to ask when the battles all around the island reached their climaxes, with the favor belong to the wizards of the Dark Guild. No, he repeated, refusing to move an inch from his position. But Naruto, in my perspective, they're doing just fine. The man, whose name Naruto, opened his right eye to look at her, plus, Tenrou tree is doing its job just fine. It better, because after all, it was him who made sure it would. Can you see they're trying to bring it down? Then I will grow it back when it's all over. Giving what Mavis would say an irresponsible respond, Naruto rolled his eyes before smirking at her, and I thought you're the one who has the most faith in Fairy Tail. Mavis blushed and looked away. You lot and that ridiculous power of friendship power-up of yours, guess naivety is something that will never change in your guild. He mocked, ending their argument. When Kana Alberona arrived at her grave, Mavis bestowed her the second spell of three great fairy magics, Fairy Glitter, to save her friend. However, because she wasn't familiar with such a powerful spell, the attack was parried to the ground by a mage who was far superior to her. Fortunately for Kana, the ace of Fairy Tail, Gildart Clive, who was none other than her biological father, arrived and saved Kana and her friends. What came next was a battle that shook the entire island, and the strongest mage of Fairy Tail managed to come out with the win. There were victories, there were lost, but in the end, when the reinforcements had finally arrived, Fairy Tail was able to push back the attacks and ensured the great Tenrou tree, and in turn their own safety. But in an attempt to destroy Fairy Tail's unlimited source of power and their wills, using his magic, Great Treearch, Azuma was able to uproot the Tenrou tree from the ground. Upon doing so, all the Fairy Tail members started to lose their magic and are unable to move, allowing the Grimoire Heart mages to gain the upper hand. However, acknowledging his opponent's power, Azuma had left Urza Scarlet, Titania of Fairy Tail, unharmed to commence their battle. She's losing, Mavis commented when the next armor broke and fell from her body. And, you still refuse to help? Mavis asked, almost in disbelief. She was the sole reason Naruto was there on the island fire a year ago. Can you at least grow the tree back? Like I said, I will grow it back when it's all over. His words clearly showed that he gave no concern for the battle's outcome. It made Mavis narrowed her eyes and pouted in response. We both know who she is, so she will be fine. Trust me, she will win. His statement seemed obvious, as well as ridiculous enough, but Mavis gave no objection. Sure, against a mage at Azuma's caliber, Mavis was still worried for her safety, but she decided to trust him, knowing full well who the woman Naruto was talking about was. The battle continued for another 5 minutes, with the only motivations being Fairy Tail and her comrades being what kept her on her legs and sword in her hands. Urza fought with everything she had left, and true to Naruto's words, Urza struck Azuma and defeated him. Naruto laughed mockingly at Mavis, who in turn, smiled smugly because once again, a mage of her pride Fairy Tail had proven that their bond and friendship could overcome anything. Nevertheless, he was happy for her but felt a little sad in the end. Such negative feeling was something that appeared and disappeared in just only a split second. He used to it, and no longer paid too much of his mind to The end of the battle was the most interesting to see, at least, in Naruto's opinion. A bunch of inexperienced brats defeated an old man with years of experience and immense magical power. They had help, a lot of help. The arrival of the third master's grandson, who was in a league of his own, the secret mission of the Exceeds, who destroyed an organic device called Devil's Heart, cutting Hades off his power source, and finally, the restoration of Tenrou tree by Ultir Milkovich, a mage of Grimoire Heart who suddenly after a conversation had a change of heart and decided to help them. But in the end, it was an impressive achievement for kids so young like them. Where? He's on their ship. Naruto gave the answer even before Mavis could finish her question. Maybe you should keep your eyes on him for a moment or two, instead of them all the time. He looked at the airship that was flying away from Tenrou, but words were targeting the mages of Fairy Tail. Are you sure that you have no care for them like you claim to? Mavis asked teasingly, deciding that she had had enough of his blunt comments. Hard to keep my eyes away when it all happened on my island. He pointed out, pressing his ownership of Tenrujima. Plus, it's funny to see them trying to act tough, and their power of friendship has always given me a good laugh. Naruto commented. They had to learn, sooner or later, that friendship wasn't going to help them overcome everything. As if Mavis could read his mind, she spoke up, surely you can teach them something different. Not gonna happen. He knew what she was trying to do, and he's not going to fall for it, not in a million years. Then you will consider it a million years later. No, Mavis giggled. She knew she got him there. Fortunately for him, that didn't last long, because when Grimoire Heart's airship disappeared from view, he could feel an immense magic power approaching the island from afar. Since she wasn't a normal ghost, Mavis' pale was noticeable, because she too could feel it. It's here. Mavis had her eyes widened in shock and horrification. She then turned to Naruto and bit her lower lip when she saw him giving no response, showing no concern. For once, Naruto, please don't just sit back and watch so heartlessly like that. Mavis spoke to him before floating away in a hurry. Looking up with keen blue eyes, Naruto could see it approaching. Unlike the ones who had noticed its presence, Naruto showed no emotion, no fear, no nervousness or whatsoever. The amusement he had when he was talking to Mavis had also disappeared, replaced with a blank expression that clearly showed that he didn't even care what was coming was, or what it was truly capable of. December 16th, X784, Fairy Tail were under the warm rays of the sun, when what could be their end inevitably came. It was going so well for them until Aknologia, the black dragon of Apocalypse, arrived. But instead of running away like normal people would, Fairy Tail charged at Aknologia. The youngest generation of Fairy Tail, against the Dragon King of Apocalypse, leading by Urza Scarlet, the other members of Fairy Tail returned to aid Natsu in his assault against the dragon, in order to protect their master, in order to protect their own, as a family. Bringing out everything that was left inside them, Fairy Tail team attacked Aknologia, bringing down wave after wave of magic on its gigantic body. You little Makarov, the third master of Fairy Tail said in bewilderment, completely shocked for what happened in front of his eyes. He had tried to fight Aknologia himself, to buy them some time to run away, but he was crushed by the powerful beast faster than he could even see it coming. In the moment he was about to face his end, they jumped in and attacked Aknologia with everything they had, doing the very thing that he, as a parent to them all, should be the one doing. I want you to know this, Ji-san. Laxus looked at his grandfather and grinned. I was against this, but do you really think that they're the kind of people who can run away and leave an old geezer behind? His grin got wilder as his hands sparked with electricity that could slay dragons. It's your guild, after all. You idiots. Tears swelled up at the corners of Makarov's eyes. He couldn't believe it and he didn't know what to say. He just sat there and watched on while sobbing quietly. In the middle of Fairy Guardian, a man stood up from his position and approached Tenrou tree, where he placed his hand on and closed his eyes. It all came down to this moment. R-O-O-O-O-A-A-A-R-R-R-R. The black dragon roared angrily and stomped its hands onto the ground, knocking the members of Fairy Tail away as if they were mere flies. The Dragon King spread its wings and took off to the sky before looking down at the island and opened its jaw, in a mass amount of air strongly. "Awa!" Natsu cried, falling on top of Lucis' back. "Is everyone alright?" Urza asked loudly as she got up from the ground. "None of our attacks is working at all," Elfman said through gritted teeth, his sister standing beside him, forced to deactivate her Satan soul form. "This thing isn't using the strength it used when it fought me," Gildart thought as he gritted his teeth, looking up at Aknologia. "It's just playing with them." "It's a breath attack," Gajil shouted when he saw energy began to swirl around Aknologia's mouth. "Is it planning on blasting the whole island away?" Kana asked in shock. "No way, seriously. Everyone who can use defensive magic put the power you've got into it, now," Urza ordered, pointing back to her group. "Right," Wendy nodded. "There's not enough time to draw the seals," Freed muttered. "There's plenty of defensive magic that does not require writing symbol or seals," Levi said hurriedly, sweats pouring down her forehead. By now anyone could feel the vast amount of magic Aknologia was emitting, even from here. "Everyone, focus all your magical energy on Freed," Lizanna shouted. "Let's join hands together," Mirajan Strauss said and offered her hands to the nearest person, her brother as he took it. "We can't let it end here," Natsu cried and grabbed Lucis' hand, his other hand quickly took Urza's hands into his. "Okay, we'll never give up," Lucy shouted, as tears flowing from her eyes. "Everyone, join your power together as one." Gray also joined in, holding Juvia and Lucis' hands as Fairy Tail stood in a circle. Laxus turned to his grandfather and offered him his hand, smiling softly to the tiny old man whose body was shaking, looking at his children in absolute shock. Then, gently he put his hand in Laxus' much bigger one, a smile made it to his face. "We'll all go home together," he said. Fairy Tail stood in a circle as magical energy flared up around them. "To Fairy Tail," they cried out all at once, looking up at Aknologia, who then unleashed his breath in a gigantic blast. Mavis looked at them, and couldn't stop herself from smiling, despite the sadness that was visible in her green eyes. The next generation of Fairy Tail fighting against the strongest dragon. Anyone who knew about the strength of the Dragon King could see that Fairy Tail was fighting in vain, as their attacks did almost no damages to the Black Dragon. The first master put her hands together and prayed. Their bonds and faiths in each other, they were something truly incredible. Mavis could feel it, and she believed, knew that they would be more enough for the final spell of the three great fairy magics to be activated. Then suddenly, after she had successfully cast the spell, a hand was put on the top of her head. "My island better not have a single scratch on it, got it?" It happened so fast that when her eyes snapped open he had already disappeared, leaving behind a gentle whirlwind of leaves. The whole sky lifted up as the massive attack of Apocalypse approached them. The whole Tenrou island shook violently at the amount of magic released by the Black Dragon. "Stay thee away from my island," was the last thing the members of Fairy Tail heard before the blinding light of Aknologia's breath attack blocked their fields of vision. Had they could see clearly, they would see a man with bright blonde hair shooting into the air with neck-breaking speed. Just in time the entire island was completely wrapped in a glowing golden sphere. When he reached his maximum height, Naruto put his feet onto the top of the gigantic sphere, using it as a jumping platform to shoot even higher and faster into the air, toward Aknologia. However, the force of his jumping leap was so powerful that it created a shockwave that knocked everyone outside Fairy Sphere back upon impact. Though their eyes couldn't follow his movement, the protected island, however, had a different, much astonishing outcome to the people that were watching everything from afar in shock and awe. It was pushed backwards into the ocean, slamming into the bottom of the sea. Wrapping his right hand in golden energy, Naruto extended his arm forward with his palm open to block Aknologia's giant roar attack, disintegrating it into smaller beams that shot away in every direction around him. His other hand back and balling it into a fist, Naruto kept pushing forward until he was out of Acnologia's blast, aiming at the dragon's torso before delivering a devastating punch into its chest. His knuckle collided with Acnologia's scale, causing the black dragon to roar in pain. Naruto's fist nearly broke through his scale like a bullet through human skin, but fortunately for him, the shockwave created by the impact knocked him back with no hope to regain the control of its balance before Naruto could sink his fist into its flesh. Acnologia flew, but not with its wings. It tried to flap its wing, but Naruto wasn't that generous. He followed, somehow flying just as fast as he could run and punched the dragon one more time, sending it higher into the air before falling down and crashing into the ground. Rolling onto the ground, leaving a long path of destruction behind, Acnologia was forced to change back to its human form. Taking the appearance of a rather muscular young man with dark skin, bearing the dark markings he does when he was a dragon and long, dark blue-colored hair that wore a high-collared black coat and baggy pants bearing the same draconian markings, he rolled on the ground for a few times before standing up on his feet while growling angrily. In a split second, just as he was able to stand on his feet, Naruto appeared right in front of him in a flash of yellow. His body crouched low, holding his hand at his hip in a manner similar to a man holding a sword, and was about to slash it. Kanso. A large golden magic circle appeared in the palm of his hand, allowing a sword to manifest in his hand. Having his eyes widened, Acnologia tried to attack Naruto and stop him from doing whatever he was planning to do. However, every move he came up, every decision he made in his mind, was simply a second too late or particularly wasn't enough against him. Faster than his eyes could follow, Naruto slashed his sword up, leaving behind a faint afterimage and of course, an extremely clean cut. Acnologia didn't even have the chance to acknowledge what Naruto had cut, because the man suddenly threw his sword into the air and shot his hand out to grab the Dragon Slayer's forehead and slammed him down to the ground, with force strong enough to crack skull in and create a huge crater on the ground. It was at that moment Acnologia realized his left arm had been severed from his body. Blood had started to flow out from his wound from his right shoulder. The pain had finally arrived, and despite that, he managed to say a single word when he had finally had a good look at the man and felt his blood turn cold. Standing at the height of 6'3" and having a lean yet muscular build, with bright spiky blonde hair, bright azure blue eyes that seemingly glowed with pure raw power, he dressed in a high-collared, white jacket with dark blue arm warmers, worn outside of a dark-colored shirt and long, black pants and matching colored sandals. His most noticeable feature, however, was the faint whisker-like marks on both sides of his cheeks, similar to that of a fox. It was him, Acnologia thought in horror, the same man who completely destroyed him 400 years ago when he was foolish enough to challenge him. But what shocked him the most was his appearance. It didn't change in the slightest. He hadn't aged a single day since their last encounter nearly 400 years ago. Naruto gave no reply. Instead, he reached his other hand out and caught the sword at the moment it was within arm reach. Twisting the sword around in his palm, Naruto then gripped the handle tightly and stabbed it down Acnologia's upper arm, tearing through the dark blue-haired man's flesh and impaling deeply into the ground. Acnologia grunted in pain but tried his best to keep it to himself, refusing to show a weakness to the man whose powers surpassed common senses. He finally said with a smirk, "Now, if I were you, I would stay exactly where you are. I aimed for the flesh only, so with a proper treatment and a decent amount of time, you can keep that arm. About the other, well," Naruto removed his hand from the Dragon Slayer's forehead and mockingly dusted the dirt, as well as blood, from the right area of his cloak, near to his bleeding shoulder. "Can't say the same. Why what were you doing there?" He growled in hatred, but wisely kept his body still. He didn't show it with his words, but with the dangerous glints in his eyes, which were promising him that, move a muscle, and you will lose more than just your right arm. "Don't you know, the island you just attacked, Tenrou, is my island. Naruto answered, unlike Dragnov, I created it, built it and made it my home. You don't go into someone's house unless you are going to pick a fight. His expression darkened. I don't tolerate disrespect, so consider yourself lucky you didn't lose your other arm or your head. If Mavis were there, she would probably tease him for not doing anything when Grimoire Heart attacked Tenrou Island, but because he could fix the damages Grimoire Heart left behind and easily rebuild it when it was all over. Acnologia's attack, however, would completely annihilate the entire island. While he could recreate an entire island, making an exact replica of the island, Tenrou was a land with an origin very special to him, and Naruto refused to have anything, let alone create something to replace its existence. So remember this to your heart, stay the FCK away from my island. Naruto flicked his forehead and stood up. Turning around, he walked away and clicked his fingers the moment he passed Acnologia's severed arm. You won't need this, I mean, you're still pretty much the most dangerous threat to the people of this world with just one arm. His arm caught fire, blew fire, and burned to ash right in front of his eyes. Leaving Acnologia behind, Naruto walked to the shore of the land, looking at the place where Tenrou was. With Fairy Sphere activated, Mavis had ensured his homeland's safety, because nothing, not even time, could make any more damage to it. There was no way he could return to Tenrou with Fairy Sphere still intact. He didn't know how long the sphere was going to last, but he understood it was going to be damn long if the casters had so much faith and trusts in each other. And unfortunately enough, from what he could see, Fairy Tail was full of them. What to do? Naruto muttered as he put his hand on his hip and looked around. Last of his era, Naruto Uzumaki was an immortal, after all. He had all the time in the world to decide, after all. Did you hear? On the newspapers, not just the newspapers, everyone is talking about it. Half of Fairy Tail's mages disappeared in a single afternoon, including the current master and all of its S-class mage. Yeah, I heard some rumors they were traveling to their personal island located somewhere far from the country. It has completely disappeared with them as well. Do you think they're dead? I don't know, the other guilds seem to think otherwise. Blue Pegasus and Lamia Scale are out there helping the remaining members of Fairy Tail, but I don't think they will have much luck. Seriously, what could possibly defeat a guild as strong as they are and bring down an entire island with them? Also, what would become of Fairy Tail now? There were two things Naruto liked about bars. They had always been great sources for information, as well as a perfect place to hear people's truthful thoughts about some certain events that happened all around the world. A few cups, drunk, and then nothing come out of your mouth was a lie, spoken from the depth of your heart. It had been 3 days since the fall of Tenrou Island, and from what he could see, the magic users of the world of magic and the civilians didn't take the news too well, which was completely understandable because they were kind of a big deal, being the strongest and #1 guild of Fury, after all. Though, Naruto didn't pay those words and opinions any mind because he knew better, and simply didn't care. It was him who had hidden Tenrou from the world to begin with. Using not just magical barriers but also his more traditional sealing techniques, Naruto was able to make his home island impossible to find no matter what magic or technique was used, blocking it from watchful eyes of mankind. Even now, deep underneath the ocean, the barriers were still doing its job, shielding Tenrou and Fairy Sphere from the ones who were searching for Fairy Tail. There's no way they could find it anytime soon, but he would love to see them trying to. He had been generous enough to allow Mavis to use Tenrou as the holy ground of her Pride Guild. There's no way he's going to let her or anyone else have more than that. Gulping down the last of his cup, Naruto stood up, paid for his drinks and turned around to leave the bar. The town he was currently staying in, which located in the far east of Fury, was a quiet and peaceful one, something he had always preferred over something boisterous. Though, he would never stay at one place for more than a few months, so he wouldn't attract unnecessary attention. Give me your money, fool. Without even looking at the thug, Naruto raised his arm and elbowed him in the face, sending him flying across the street before crashing through the window of a local store. His friends, fellow thugs, looked at Naruto with wide eyes and parted away in fear, making a path for him to walk through. With a sigh, Naruto made his way out of the town and disappeared into the forest. It should be noted that he was walking aimlessly because he hadn't decided where he should head to next. 10,000 years had passed and yet nothing had changed. One should always expect anything and everything at the same time, and even without having to go through and experience it all himself in the past, he knew this to be true. After all, his life had been screwing with him for as long as he could remember, over and over. He had to admit that while it was indeed awesome, it was up at the same time. People hated him then adored him, some secretly loved him, and others saw him as an orange-loving idiot who would stop at nothing to have a dozen bowls of ramen every meal, which was what used to be, but that wasn't the point. Either way, he didn't expect his life to turn upside down that fast. From angry people with bloodthirsty eyes hunting him down out of rage and maybe just for the fun of it, to an asshole who shoved a hand through his chest, and later hoped to take control of the entire world and kill him for the sake of his pessimistic view of peace. Unfortunately, said asshole happened to be the one person he would call his brother in nothing blood. His life had finally become worse when a war started over him. The Jubi was revived and so was Madara Uchiha, who later received the fastest transgender surgery in the history by a black glob with a face and turned into a woman, who quite frankly, freaked him out with her abnormal affection for her offspring. One should always expect anything and everything at the same time, but he didn't expect to become immortal. That one really shocked him, because he honestly wasn't expecting that one to happen out of everything else. Imagine his face when he woke up one morning and had everyone told him exactly what was happening. He took it as hard, as anyone who could no longer die could have. He drowned himself in self-pity, in the sadness of the thought of seeing his loved ones slowly dying around him while he would be the only one get left behind. It didn't take him less than a few centuries to pick himself together and decided that if he couldn't die he might as well make it worth. He watched a generation that filled with miracles, but also blood and hatred slowly die out after a long life and then witnessed the birth of the new one through the ashes of the previous era. It was a generation that only knew peace. Under his watch, it never knew what war was, or how much pain and suffering it could cause and bring. But much like the cycle of hatred, something he had hoped to put a stop to but realized it would never end as long as mankind was the same, it repeated. A new era raised and a new one took its place. Over and over again, the cycle continued and didn't seem to have a stop. Soon enough, he became tired of being a god to his people, tired of watching the ones he came to love and cared about all leaving him behind like anyone before did and after them would, and tired of trying to do what he did best, a hero, and in return received nothing but pain and suffering. So with a heavy heart, he left his home and started to wander the lands as it changed, shifted and altered over time. Time went by far faster than he had expected, and before he realized it, he had been forgotten. Even his homeland had been reduced to the size of an island by the ocean, the very same island that was now called Tenrou. Elemental nations had changed, and while it was only known by the historians who dug the deepest into the ancient times, it had completely forgotten by others. The world's now called Earthland, and along with its name, the knowledge of chakra and shinobi arts had also disappeared. Once feared by civilians, magic had risen and become an everyday phenomenon. Even Naruto, who spent nearly 1,000 years to master every art of shinobi, couldn't stop himself from testing himself in the arts of magic. When he first learned how to use magic, he was like a child in the candy store, because of the magical elements of them gave him the thrill unlike any other. It was an interesting way for Naruto to spend his endless time, but nonetheless, it reminded him of the old days, the time when he was taught his first ninja's techniques by his teachers. Traveling by foot for another 10 minutes, Naruto suddenly came to a stop and decided to speak up loud and clear after a moment of silence. You know I can feel your presence from a mile away, so you don't have to call out to let me know you're here." After that, he turned around and looked at the young man who walked out from behind a tree. Having arrived in a dark magic portal just a few feet behind Naruto, the young man was about to call to get his attention, but obvious enough, it wasn't necessary. "Naruto." "Zirf." Naruto nodded his head, saying that in acknowledgement, "Can't say I'm not surprised to see you here." The man who was standing before him was none other than Zirf, the strongest dark mage in the history of magic. Despite being a wizard who was famous for his extremely powerful and dangerous magic for more than 4 centuries, Zirf had the appearance of a young man, with black hair and dark eyes. Because much like Naruto, Zirf was an immortal, but his immortality came from the contradictory curse of Anksaram, which forced him to live forever, and kill anything he desires. It had proven the fact that immortality was nothing but a curse. When Naruto first met Zirf, he was quite shocked to know that Zirf was an immortal like him, and having gone through everything, he had to admit he felt bad for the guy because, in some way, the contradictory curse made Zirf's life worse than his. However, at least Zirf was killable, so he could still find some peace in the end. Zirf had already planned his death out and created a book from it, literally. "It's been a while, Naruto," the dark mage said, lowering his head just a little with a small smile on his lips. "It's hard to find you these days, but I see that you're still doing very well." "Not as well as you are, but thank you." Naruto rolled his eyes, his voice full of sarcasm. "How's it going for you? You got kidnapped the last time I saw you, if I recall correctly." "It's nothing important." Zirf shook his head, the smile nearly disappeared from his face as he approached Naruto. "What important is what came, and happened afterwards." "You mean Acknowledge?" It wasn't a question. Now that Zirf had mentioned the guy, Naruto couldn't help but wonder what the so-called Black Dragon of Apocalypse was doing, as well as feeling, at the moment. Acknowledge had his pride hurt, his oversized ego crushed, for the second time, and right arm lost. They're 3 of the worst things that could happen to a prideful man in a single day. After all, he had it coming for trying to destroy my home. Naruto said with a bored expression before adding with a smirk, "But I didn't kill him, so you and that little country of yours pretty much still have something to worry about, but the bright side is that the empire still has the original purpose of its existence. It'd be better if you just finished that thing for good." Zirf frowned but then shook his head with a smile, "But I have to admit that it was quite a display of strength back there. It's been a while since I last saw you using that much power in a battle, and it still amazed me like the first time. I'm just a guy trying to protect his home, nothing special." Naruto humbly mocked, extending his arms out and bowing his head in a dramatic manner. Battle. He wouldn't call it one. A battle was something where both opponents had chances of winning, regardless of how small they were. He could crush Acknowledge without breaking a sweat, not that he could in a something like that, so why should he acknowledge it as a battle, when the favor was clearly his and his alone? "Still, thank you." Naruto raised an eyebrow at Zirf's words of gratitude, for protecting Natsu. "I didn't save him, Zirf, it was Mavis." The immortal shinobi pointed out. Fairy sphere manifested even before Acknowledge's attack could travel halfway to Tenrou, so it's Mavis who you should give your gratitude to. Zirf said nothing in response, his face didn't show any emotion, but Naruto could feel a slight shift in his feelings when he mentioned Mavis. "Anyway, I saw your little reunion with the brat. Didn't turn out like you had hoped it would, did it?" "It didn't," Zirf admitted while shaking his head sadly. "Natsu is still not yet ready. I could hardly feel anything when he punched me. When he returns, do you think you can?" "I have said it before and I'll say it once again, Zirf, so you won't get too hope up this time as well." Naruto turned his head around to look at the dark mage, stating emotionlessly, "I won't train your brother, find someone else to do that. Plus, it's extremely troublesome to train brats like him. It's for you and him to decide who is going to die first." The black-haired immortal sighed and looked down. "Do you think that Natsu can kill me in the near future?" Doubt it. Naruto rolled his eyes, but then added nonetheless, but maybe. Nothing could happen, after all. One should always expect anything and everything at the same time. I hope so. The legendary dark mage nodded, smiling gently at the thought. It took a few seconds, but he finally decided to ask, "What are you going to do now, Naruto, now that Tenrou is gone for the time being?" "I don't know, I think I will stick around here for a while. I don't know how long Fairy Sphere is going to last, but I don't think it's going to disappear in a year or two." He then glanced to Zirf, only for a second before looking away and saying with a grin, with his hands in his pocket, "But I think I know where I should be next." Zirf nodded his head in understanding. "It's actually a surprise for me to see you walking around without her following just a step behind." The dark mage commented, "I hope everything is still alright between the two of you." "Don't worry, everything is perfectly fine. It's just that I want her to spend some years experiencing the life with her own kind, not just with me," Naruto said. "She listens, carries out every word and order I say without a second thought, but from me, she won't be able to learn anything. Staying with me, Sayla would be the same demonic servant you programmed her to be, and I don't want that." "I see, I really should have asked your opinions before creating her, shouldn't I?" "Don't worry, in a way, I like her personality. It's just that she should loosen up a little bit, and start having more respect for herself like I have always had for her. Then I shouldn't waste any more of your time." Zirf smiled. "It's time for me to take my leave. Come to her, Naruto. You don't have to tell me." The immortal shinobi grinned. "Do you know where she is right now? Shouldn't be too hard to find her." He shrugged in response. "She joined Tartarus, didn't she? I could track them down, but it's actually not necessary." "One more thing." "What about?" But Zirf had never gotten the chance to finish that question because Naruto had given the answer without thinking. "She seems fine on her own." Blankly, he said before walking away with his hands in his pockets, leaving Zirf behind wondering if he should tell the woman in question about his encounter with Naruto, and what he said about her. A few months period, Oracion Cease had been taken down by the Alliance Fairy Tail, Blue Pegasus and Lamia's Scale. After their ultimate defeat, the guild had been dissolved and all members were being imprisoned by the Magic Council. In X784, Grimoire Heart was the strongest guild in existence, with the illusion goal of reawakening Zirf, someone who had never needed to be awakening to begin with the hope of creating the ultimate magic world, which led them to Tenrou where they found Fairy Tail's S-class mage promotion trial to be taking place. An all-out war broke out between the two guilds, which Fairy Tail ultimately won, though not unscratched. The majority of its force was taken down by the wizards of Fairy Tail. While two of its core members decided to abandon the guild, the rest were killed by the dark mage they worshipped, Zirf, putting an end to the dark guild that reigned terror all over Fury. However, the falls of two of Oracion Cease and Grimoire Heart didn't put an end to the alliance between three most powerful dark guilds between three of the most powerful dark guilds in Fury. Tartarus was the name of the last guild of the Balam Alliance. Because it had always hidden behind the dark guilds under their control, preferring to run the underworld from the dark, its very existence had always been a big mystery to the people of Fury, so no one would have imagined the guild being comprised mostly of Aetherius, an extremely powerful race of demons born from the books of Zirf. Being one of these Aetherius demons, Sayla was a member of Tartarus and its core team, Cucumin 9 Demon Gates. Taking the appearance of a woman, with exceptionally large and most noticeable feature being the two large gold-looking horns protruding from the sides of her head and pointing upwards, Ryojutsudan, goddess of the chill moon, Sayla was an extremely voluptuous demoness with unrivaled beauty, recognized by her fellow Aetherius as the most beautiful demon among them. Upon her head was a white band that separated the front of her hair, framing her bangs from her hair below the band. For clothing, Sayla wore a very revealing beige-colored leopard-printed kimono, bearing the black markings on her shoulders. The kimono was wrapped around her torso with a thick, decorative yellow ribbon that was tied behind her back, and her outfit was complemented by thigh-high socks that revealed her heels and toes, a white-colored strap that tied around her neck, where a necklace with a crystal gem that hung just above her cleavage was also worn. Sitting in a comfortable armchair by the window of the main hall of Tartarous's guild building with her leg crossed over the other, Sayla ignored the attention she was receiving from the lesser demons and kept her mind solely on the book she was reading. Despite being the youngest Aetherius, Zeref's last creation, Salis was by no means a weak demon. Her power was recognized by many, and it became the reason she was able to earn her position among the strongest, Hucumen. But it wasn't her beauty or her clever mind, or her power which was a form of curse that allows her to fully control the body of her victims and manipulate them as if she was giving orders that made her special, unique and distinct from others. While all other Aetherius possessed an inborn drive to kill the Creator, established at the genetic level, which was the reason they were created and expressed consciously as a feeling to return to his side, Sayla was created with the sole purpose of serving her master with the best of her ability, and an instinct to put his needs and wishes at the top of her priority. Unconsciously, Sayla removed her hand from the page of her book and reached for the beautiful necklace she wore around her neck. It was a gift from her master, something she treasured just as much as she treasured his affectionate attention for her. Sayla was worried, as she had always been for the last 19 years since the last time she saw him. She knew better than doubting his ability to take care of himself, but there was not a single day she could stop thinking about him, wondering what he was doing and asking herself if he was happy without her at his side. Serving him, Naruto Uzumaki, was something she took great pride in, so imagine her feelings when he suddenly decided to send her away to live with her fellow demons for a few years after over 300 years of service. She was shocked and horrified when she heard it. She had thought she had done something wrong, or something that had seriously offended him, and on her knees, she had tried to beg for forgiveness. It came as a relief to Sayla when he told her she didn't do anything wrong and spent the next few minutes comforting her with gentle words. He wanted her to experience a life with her kind, and while Sayla had insisted that there was no need for such, he refused to change his decision. It was the only time she didn't want to listen to his words, which came out more of a request than an order. However, she was still extremely worried, no longer for her but for him. The morning after, she left him and went on a journey to find the other Aetherius demons, who had been gathered by a demon called Mardgeir of Tartarus under the will of End, the strongest Aetherius demon. Much to her surprise, before she left her master had given her his necklace as a promise to be the one who would come looking for her in the near future. His necklace, and his promise, they had finally set her heart at peace, allowing her to go on her own way without worrying about him having no more use for her. It didn't take her long to find Tartarus, as their activities were very strong at the time. From that point, she had become the guild's active member, and proved herself more than one time that she's a valuable asset to their goals. But what was bothering him? She had to wonder because at the time, he seemed distracted. He usually spaced out for no reason, and sometimes asked her stay behind to go somewhere else alone. It worried her, and she had tried to ask him about it, but he changed the topic and started admiring the weathers faster than he could move. Thinking it as a personal matter, Sayla willingly stopped bothering him with her curiosity, but she wasn't able to stop worrying every time he returned and just went straight to sleep. Maybe it was the real reason he had decided to send her away, not just because he wanted her to spend a few years with her fellow Aetherius. She wasn't stupid, and had spent enough time with her master to know if he was up to something. In a way, it could be said that she understood him better than he understood himself. Gently playing with the crystal with the tip of her fingers, Sayla exhaled longingly and leant back against her armchair, turning her head to the side to look out the window. Maybe he would come to her today, maybe he would tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. Either way, she would still happily return to side once again and accompany him for the rest of eternity, as his loyal and faithful servant. You seem to be deep in thought, thinking about your master again. Deep in thought, Sayla didn't realize a demon was standing only a foot in front of her until they had spoken up. Returning her attention back to the front, Sayla had her eyes widened for a second before she quickly stood up from her seat to greet them with a slight but respectful bow of her head. Hyoka-sama. Hyoka had a very distinct appearance, most notably due to her half-human, half-aviary characteristics. She seemed to be of average height and weight, yet possessed a really large chest and a curvaceous hourglass figure. Covering her form was a skin-tight suit that further emphasized her chest, revealing her thighs and partially exposing her buttocks. Her shoulders and arms were concealed by a long, striped jacket with flaring sleeves, a four-way split tailback and a tall and gaping collar that completely covered Kyoka's neck. Kyoka's hands, however, took the form of sharp and scaly talons, whilst a thick pair of bands wrap around her thighs, stopping where a similar set of bird-like feet begin. She finished her outfit with an intricate helmet with a large gem on her forehead, which covered almost the entirety of her face save for her eyes and mouth. There were two long wing-like pieces of hair protrude from the sides, curving out around her face. The rest of her hair fell to her lower back, being wrapped tightly into a thick band. Like Sayla, she was an Aetherius of the Dark Guild Tartarus and a member of the 9 Demon Gates, as well as its leader. Among the members of the Kyukimen and their guild masters, Kyoka was the one she admired and respected the most, being one of the only demons that had greater power than hers, and the one who vouched for her when she appeared at Tartarus's doorstep when the rest doubted her for the differences between their innate desires. "You're reading." The green-haired demoness smiled as she looked at the book in Sayla's hand. "Yes, Kyoka-sama, I found this book rather interesting." Sayla answered with a nod of her head. "Is there anything you need?" "You haven't answered my question." Kyoka leant her body forward and looked at Sayla in the eyes. A mischievous smile crossed her lips. "Were you thinking about your master again?" The black-haired demon blushed and with a soft smile, she nodded her head. I should have known." The goddess of the slave planet rolled her eyes. "You sure he still remembers you?" "It's been 19 years, hasn't it?" Sayla sighed mentally. "There she goes again. Master is busy. He is going to require my assistance once again as soon as he's done." Every time the two of them started a conversation about her master, she would bring that topic up, as if she thought Sayla's devotion for her master would change. It was rather obvious that Kyoka was infatuated with her, and was jealous of her sole affection for her master. Other than respect and admiration, Sayla had no special feeling for Kyoka, but for the last 19 years, Sayla had ended up in the superior demon's bedroom and engaged behaviors with her countless times, more than she could remember. It's a demon's thing, so she really couldn't help it. She had a very similar relationship with her master, though her times with him were strangely much more enjoyable. So did she feel ashamed for letting someone else, a woman but still someone else, touch her inappropriately like that? No, she didn't. It's not like there was anything special in their relationship. She had learnt from books that men were rather possessive of the women they were in love with, but while he had shown a great amount of affection for her, it's not like he's in love with her or anything. In addition, while she cared very much for him and loved the attention he had for her, she had never viewed herself as his lover. She was his servant, and he was her master, nothing more, nothing less. But suddenly, Sayla frowned and became troubled. "There's nothing wrong about that, right?" "Right, saying that, but still you have doubt, huh?" Kyoka smirked. Even though she noticed her frown and troubled look, she had mistaken them for something else. "Is there anything you need, Kyoka-sama?" The goddess of the chill moon quickly changed the topic, feeling the unnecessary to continue the current one with someone like Kyoka. "Yes, I need you to carry out this mission for me." Kyoka answered, "As you have already known, Grimoire Heart has been demolished by Fairy Tail." Sayla nodded her head in understanding. The news about the fall of Grimoire Heart was all over humans' newspapers, and while she could never bring herself to read one of them because they were so boring, she had heard some lesser demons gossiped about it. It was quite a surprise, but not shocking. Well, We need to make sure that the dark guilds under their control remember where they belong. I will need you to go through every single one of them to make sure that they know their place. If they try to do anything suspicious, you know what to do." Sayla nodded her head seriously. "I will go to my room to prepare and will leave as soon as possible," she said, bowing her head to the green-haired demon. "Good." Kyoka smiled. "Remember that I expect nothing but success from you, Sayla." After saying goodbye to Kyoka, Sayla quickly made her way back to her room. She had a mission and she intended to carry it out with the best of her ability. Opening the door, Sayla walked into her room and closed it behind her. It was at that moment Sayla felt a presence behind her, and without the need to think, she turned around and thrust her palm forward. "Hey, Say, whoa," the person said in surprise and quickly dodged his head to the side, causing her hand to pass his head harmlessly and hit the wall behind him instead. That part of the wall was completely destroyed, and the force of her attack made the room rock slightly. "You're that angry?" he asked teasingly as her eyes widened in shock. "Master," she exclaimed in happiness, but then horrification when she realized she had tried to crush his head, not that she could, and immediately got down to her knees and lowered her head so low that her head touched the floor. "I'm so sorry for trying to attack you. Please forgive me. It's all right. It's my fault, to begin with," Naruto said as he kneeled down and put his hand on her shoulder to lift her up. "Please raise your head, there's no need for you to bow." "Master, you're here?" she said, looking at him for a second before throwing herself at him, wrapping her arms tightly around his shoulder. "I have missed you so much," she said with happiness. "It's been so long." Grinning, he hugged her back, returning her heartfelt welcome. "I've missed you too, Sayla," he said as he leant his head against hers, taking in the alluring scent that he loved and missed so much. "I'm so sorry for making you wait this long," he said, gently stroking her hair before pulling her close to capture her lips in a searing kiss. Of course, it wasn't their first time he had kissed her, but it surprised her every single time. It made her heart flutter, and soon, Sayla found herself kissing him back with just as much passion. After a minute, Naruto pulled back and smiled at her. Sayla was just as beautiful as he remembered her to be. "How have you been?" "I've been doing well, Master." Sayla smiled. "I did what you ordered me to do. I found the other Aetherius demons and came to live with them," she said, before asking, "How did you find me, Master?" "With this necklace." His hand reached out and touched the gem of her necklace. "It's a special gem that responds to my chakra, so I can feel it even if you are halfway across the world. I have also added special seal into it, making it a marker for technique. You wear it, and I can find you no matter where you are and come to you in an instant." "Master," she smiled softly, her cheeks dusted pink. "You have changed, Sayla." Naruto smiled as he eyed her with keen eyes. But then, he frowned. "I owe you an apology, Sayla. I really shouldn't send you away against your will like that. It's just..." "Please don't say that, Master." Sayla interrupted and put her hand on his cheek. "You have your reason, and I respect that, just as much as I respect you." Naruto sighed but smiled at her nonetheless. "Are you free right now?" he asked, and Sayla uncomfortably shook her head. "What's it?" "Tartarus wants me to go to the dark guilds that were under Grimoire Heart's control to remind them that we're still here." Naruto nodded in understanding. "Grimoire Heart, I know what happened to them. I was there and watched it." Naruto shrugged, causing Sayla to widen her eyes in surprise. "To tell you the truth, I care very little about it. Anyway, dark guilds, huh? Do you mind if I tag along?" "You don't." "I don't have to because I want to." Naruto grinned. "We have a lot to catch up to, and I'm dying to hear your stories with Tartarus, so why wasting any more time?" Well, if you insist." It's just like what he said. They had a lot to catch up to. Standing with his back lean against the tree, Naruto crossed his arms on his chest and watched the burning building before him slowly crumbling down to the ground. The door was then blasted apart, and Sayla came walking out of the guild building of Dark Unicorn with a calm and hard expression on her face, but it didn't last long and immediately softened when she saw him standing outside, waiting for her. "Did I make you wait, master?" Sayla asked as she stood in front of him, sounding apologetic. "Nah, don't worry, it's fine." Naruto shook his head and then noticed a small bloodstain on Sayla's left cheek, probably from one of the dark mages she killed at close range. "Hold on." With a small smile on his face, Naruto reached his hand out and gently cupped her cheek, keeping her head still so he could wipe the bloodstain away from her face with the sleeve of his jacket. "I guess the negotiation didn't turn out too well, did it?" As Sayla blushed at his affectionate attention, her immortal master turned his eyes to look at the burning building and saw it collapsed completely. Those humans didn't quite agree with the ways we're running the underworld. Plus, they looked down on me and tried to touch me. It's a complete waste of time, so I ended their stories. Sayla looked at him and answered truthfully, causing the blonde to chuckle humorously. "Dark Unicorn is a weak guild anyway, so even if they accept my offer, I don't think they will have much use for Tartarus," she said distastefully, but then realized Naruto was no longer wiping her cheek, but still holding her face in his hand. "Master?" she asked in confusion, looking directly at him in the eyes. She saw love in them, the same love he had always had for her ever since she came to his side. "You're very beautiful, you know that?" His question surprised her. It was just a few simple words meant to praise her facial appearance, which had always been described by him and everyone as breathtaking, but of all the words he could tell her, they were the least of her expectations. It wasn't the first time he had said those words to her, and she wasn't expecting it to be the last. But for the first time ever, she felt the weight and the depth of his words, the real reason why he had always said them with so much love and affection. The Aetherius, for the past 19 years, they had given praises to her beauty for more than she could remember. Among them, she had the least facial appearance of a demon, which being the horns on her head. It made her look more like the human, the race she had come to hate with a passion, but the demons didn't seem to care and so did she. Kyoka, of course, had complimented Sayla multi-times. She was the only one besides her master had seen more of the goddess of chill moon than just her face, and the generous amount of say appeals that her clothes could barely keep from attention. However, now that she thought about it, she couldn't help but notice the difference between her master's compliments and the Aetherius, especially Kyoka's compliments on her beauty, as well as how she felt about them. Though she had never shown it, Sayla allowed herself to be easily by their compliments, for she had a lot of pride in her appearance. Other than that, she felt nothing. She was beautiful, possibly the most beautiful female Aetherius, so it's natural for them to find her beautiful and sexy. Even humans, the humans she had taken great pleasure in killing, couldn't keep their disgusting eyes off her. But when it came to her master, it was a whole different story. By no means was she the only one he had given those words to. Having accompanied him for more than 3 centuries, she had watched him falling in love with many women, as he had a tendency for falling for women that he spent a lot of time around with, and saying the same words to them for more than either of them could remember, but strangely he had always made her feel more special than any of them. Why? She didn't understand. Her heart warmed up every time he did that. It brought a smile to her face without reason, making her feel butterflies in her stomach. Butterflies in her stomach. Sayla almost sniggered at herself for using a strange human's definition. She had read about it in one of their boring books, and she had never truly understood the definition until now. Was it because she was in love with him, her master? The romantic novels she had read over the years had given her the answer, but she didn't trust any of them. She didn't like any of them to begin with, but she had always forced herself to read them for 2 reasons, with the first being the limitation of the demon's library, as most of the books of demons had been made into Aetherius, and the second being her master, so she could understand him more, as he was once human. She had so many feelings for her master: respect, admiration, obeisance, but she didn't even know if love was one of them or could have the honor to call herself his lover. She didn't know if it was possible for an Aetherius like her to develop something outside of how they were programmed, but whenever she was around him, she felt giddy and extremely happy. Sayla had always kept her demeanor in a calm mask, but whenever she was talking to him, she felt that mask slipping, and she started acting not that much different from a female human who was crazily in love with someone. Love had always been a strange definition for Sayla. 300 years, she accompanied him around the world, yet she had never thought about it. They were close, but was love a feeling that they could share mutually? Master cared for her, deeply, but was it his love for her? Or was it something else? Was it how he had always treated his servants? He was a god to an entire era, so she wouldn't feel surprised if she wasn't his first servant or the first of his long list of servants that had the honor to keep his bed warm with her body. Particularly Immortal, it's the only thing that made her more special and different from them. She must admit that she really didn't care if he was in love with her or not, but if she was truly in love with him, then so be it, but it still wouldn't make any difference to her position as his servant, right? Right. For the second time of the day, she doubted herself. She almost sniggered at that. The cold and calculating Ryojutsudan was being confused by her own feelings. It was something one couldn't see every day. Back to the real world, deep in her thought, Sayla didn't realize the two of them had been staring at each other for a while, but the next second when she blinked, she felt his lips on her, kissing her softly. Sayla was rather surprised, but she kissed him back nonetheless. Wrapping her arms around his neck and parting her lips, she closed her eyes and let him deepen the kiss to his liking, moaning softly when his tongue explored her mouth yet again. Her hands tangled in his hair, and she felt his hands slip down to her hips to bring her closer. They stayed like that for a while. Even after Naruto had stopped, Sayla continued, so Naruto had no other choice but tag along with her for more. He didn't mind all that much, because he had always enjoyed the feeling of her lips on his, especially when she put so much effort into the kiss. Then suddenly, while still kissing him, Sayla removed her hands from the back of his head and moved them down to his pants. Before he could do anything, Sayla had already unbuckled his pants. She was about to remove the rest after pulling down his zipper, but Naruto chose to stop her from doing whatever she was planning to do by grabbing her shoulders to push her back, but not too hard so she wouldn't misunderstand his intention. "Whoa whoa, keep it down right there, girl," Naruto said as he looked at Sayla, who had her eyes widened when she finally realized what she had tried to do. "Master, I'm so," of course, she would try to apology in panic. He had expected just as much from his beautiful demoness, who had always tried to apology to him every time she thought she had done him something wrong. No, it's all right, I don't mind. It's not like I don't want to do it with you or anything, but now is not the time for it." He then raised his hand and pointed toward the completely destroyed building before them. "Plus, we're also in not the right place. You just killed a bunch of people, whose corpses were only a few feet away from us. Killing a lot of your enemies and then having right their honor beside their corpses would only make us look like a couple of psychos, you know." He was immortal, and he had been many things, but a psycho was definitely not one of them. Though, Naruto must admit that he had lost his sanity once or twice in the past because of the harsh life of an immortal. Zipping up his zipper and fastened the belt around his waist, Naruto looked at Sayla and saw the troubled expression on her face. Smiling, Naruto leant forward and kissed her again, much to her surprise. "Don't just stand there." Taking a step back, Naruto grabbed her hand and walked away, pulling her with him. "Let's just get your mission for Tartarus over with so we can go somewhere more private. I promise you won't be wearing any of your clothes by the time we get there." He winked playfully, causing Sayla to blush. "If that is what you wish, master." Sayla nodded her head, finally returning the smile to her face. "So Sayla, tell me about Tartarus," Naruto asked as they traveled through the forest. "Did they treat you right? Were you able to make any friend there?" Yes, master, they treated me very nice. Sayla answered truthfully, though, I wouldn't call any of them my friend. While we're friendly to each other, the concept of friend doesn't apply to us. Naruto nodded his head in understanding. Fair enough, he guessed, the lesser demons respect me for my strength, and I also have some respect for those who are stronger than me. The Kyukimen are the only ones I normally communicate with, so I don't know much about the others. Not that she cared about any of them. Tell me more about them then. Well, Jackal-sama is a boisterous demon with a lot of pride in his curse, so I don't really enjoy his company, much like Franmath-sama, who can get very excited and impatient, and Easel, because he has very little respect to me as well as no dignity. Tempestor-sama and Ki-sama are both quiet type, while Torifuzar-sama is the most serious of the 9, so I really enjoy working with him. Silver is a new member of our team, but I enjoy his company the most. We usually sit down and have nice conversations with each other. He is also a great listener, so I usually tell him stories of my traveling with you. Well, the guy seems nice, might as well try to find an opportunity to meet him one day. Naruto nodded before asking, well, that's 7 of them, what about the last one? Kyoka-sama is the leader of the 9 demon gates, and she is the one who has been the nicest to me, and the one I have the most respect to. Sayla smiled, she vouched for me when I arrived at Tartarous's doorstep. Since we have different objectives, the other Aetherius didn't have much trust for me back then. I am very grateful for what she has done for me, so I have tried to repay her as much as I can. Repay? How? Naruto asked in interest. I fulfill every task she asks me to do, and, she stopped, unable to bring herself to say it. And, it's nothing important, master. She answered, unable to bring herself to look at him when he looked at her. She had never thought too serious about it before because she believed that he wouldn't care, as it was nothing serious. Now, she thought otherwise. She was afraid how he was going to react to her answer. What's wrong with her today? Answer me, Sayla. Naruto pressed on while crossing his arms on his chest, it's an order. Sayla gulped nervously, quote. She said it very fast but was nowhere near fast enough. Naruto blinked once, then he blinked twice. He heard it very clearly, but decided to ask nonetheless, excuse me. What's that again? Gulping, Sayla steeled her nerve and answered, I have with her whenever she asks me to, I'm so sorry master. She added quickly, lowering her head in shame. So, you have with her? Naruto inquired, a lot of times in the past 19 years. Yes. Feel good. Kyoka-sama's curse can be used to heighten the sense of pleasure, so, she immediately slapped her hands over her mouth in horror. She looked up, and saw her master smirking darkly at her with his eyes half lifted. Master, she stuttered nervously. Why are you so nervous, Sayla? Naruto asked with a bright smile, too bright for her liking. You shouldn't worry too much about it, I'm not angry at you or anything. He leant forward and looked at her in the eyes, their faces were only an inch from each other. Kyoka is the one who should be worrying about her life, because I'm going to kill her for touching you inappropriately. Sayla gasped in horror, but then he continued, oh wait, I'm going to make you kill her because watching it is going to give me so much fun. Was it possible? Because Kyoka was a stronger Aetherius than Sayla. Big deal, he could make her 10, or hundreds of times stronger than the strongest Aetherius, and, with his chakra, let alone a mere demon like the Kyoka. Sayla tried to open her mouth to talk, but when she saw the ground underneath him and around them breaking and the wind starting to pick up uncontrollably under the pressure of a fragment of his power, she knew he was angry and there's nothing she could say to change his mind. She didn't want Kyoka to die, not because the two of them had shared some intimate moments in her bedroom, but because she was a fellow Aetherius. Human, they slaughtered each other for their own gains, but nearly every single Aetherius demon shared the same objective, the same dream, something that they wanted to archive together, and for that, they had a mutual respect for each other. Even though Sayla was created for a different purpose, she knew how it felt like to be driven by inner desire. She understood their devotions for their goals, so she didn't want any of them to die before they could fulfill it. However, if it was her master's order, and he rarely gave her order, then she would fulfill it without question, and with the very best of her ability. Then so be it. Sayla lowered her head, stating calmly, "I will carry out your order this instant, master." She turned around and was about to walk away when suddenly Naruto shot his hand and grabbed her wrist, stopping her from advancing any further. "Relax, I was just kidding." Naruto chuckled, causing Sayla to drop her jaw in shock. "I won't kill her, or make you kill her." Her expression immediately brightened up. "Really, master? Other than the fact that you were doing it behind my back, which I don't like one bit," her smile dropped, "I don't mind it that much. Maybe it's because Kyoka is also a woman, and I'm kind of into that girl-on-girl thing, you see, but maybe because it's something I truly, really deserve, for taking my eyes off you for more than a second." "Master, you," but he raised his hand and stopped her from saying anything more. "I really shouldn't send you away, but then again, it's not like I have any other choice." Naruto muttered the last part to himself, so Sayla wasn't able to hear it. "So, having with her really felt that good, huh?" he asked, giving her a teasing smile that caused her to blush. "Think you can introduce me to her? A threesome, maybe, master." "Ah, I know you love that idea." Naruto grinned, putting both his hands on her cheeks. He could feel her blush very clearly. Who could have thought that his usual calm and cold servant could blush like a teenager girl like that? "Please stop teasing me, master." Ah, so she could make a request as well. It seemed his decision had turned out better than he thought it would. Still, she needed a reminder, and he knew exactly the way to remind her. "Sayla." He suddenly moved her head and turned her eyes to the front, making sure that she was looking straight at him in the eyes. "Do you know what I want to do next?" "Unfortunately no, master." Sayla shook her head, smirking. Naruto leant forward and whispered into her ears. The Aetherius immediately blushed beet red. Master, it is." The demon stuttered nervously. Her face felt so hot that she just knew it had turned a brilliant shade of crimson and glowed almost visibly, even in the middle of daylight. She could also feel her strong and fast heartbeat, accelerated by the dirty thoughts that went through her mind. However, she was no less excited. "So you really like it, huh?" Naruto asked. His smirk became sly and widened. "So what do you say? Screw your mission and allow your master remind you of his awesomeness that none enhancement magic can hope to compare. If that is what you..." But Sayla had never had the chance to finish her respond. It all happened so fast she actually felt a little dizzy. She was grabbed by her master, while at the same time their surroundings changed faster than a blink. Next, her clothes were torn to shreds by his hands and squealed when she was tossed onto a decent-sized bed. She turned around, and he was already on top of her. Their lips crashed together before her hands were forced above her head. With only one hand, he kept her wrists together and let his free hand travel over her bare front, feeling her smooth skin and the incredible softness of her firm and heavy chest. When her master whispered into her ear, he had promised her two things: intense pleasure, and incredible soreness, by the time they were done and thorough. She knew better than anyone that Naruto Uzumaki would always keep his promise, no matter what. One thing for sure, at the end, she wouldn't be able to think of anyone or anything but him. It's something she was truly looking forward to. Time skipped 7 years later. 7 years had passed since the day Tenrou Island, wrapped protectively inside one of the 3 great fairy magic, fairy sphere disappeared completely from the surface of Earthland, bringing the top strongest mages of Fairy Tail down to the deepest part of the sea with it. Fairy Tail, from the strongest guild of Fury, had become the lowest, weakest mage guild in Fury. Without its former income, the guild fell into near bankruptcy and could no longer afford to keep their building, which was forced into foreclosure soon after. After they left it, the remaining members of Fairy Tail moved into a small tavern at the edge of the town and made it their base of operations. 7 years. Wakaba, a member of Fairy Tail, wondered his thought out loud as he blew out smoke from his cigar. It's really hard for me to believe that it's been that long. The good old days, Max said as he sighed longingly, that really takes me back. Nothing has been the same since then, Warren stated tearfully as he looked at the pictures that fell to the ground after the new guild in town, Twilight Ogre had come and wrecked the place. After learning the horrible news, the remaining members of Fairy Tail had tried to search for their family with everything they had, but not a single one of them was found. All different kinds of organizations had joined together in the search, but none of their efforts had also resulted in anything. The Magic Council had let them know that it was Aknowledge who had eradicated the entire island. It had shocked them to the core and taken all hopes from them because they all knew the story of the legendary dragon, which destroyed an entire continent on its own. It was just that there was no human alive would be able to take on that dragon. Suddenly, while they were still in the middle of their tearful moment, they all heard a loud rumbling sound coming from above them. "What's that?" Droy questioned in confusion. "Is Ogre coming again?" Jet asked, growling in frustration. Hurriedly, the mages ran outside of the guild hall and looked up, only to have their eyes widened when they saw Blue Pegasus Guild's magic airship, Christina, floating above them. Before any of them could say anything, a voice cried out from the ship, which for some reason, getting louder and louder by the second, "Men." Suddenly an object crashed into the ground with frightening impact, shocking the members of Fairy Tail. Looking back at the small crater that appeared once the dust had finally settled, everyone's eyes widened in shock when they saw it was the infamous Ichia from Blue Pegasus lying on his side in the crater. "Just for you, Fairy Tail," he said, pointing towards them. Appearing to be unaffected by the fall, "I'm Ichia. We understand how you feel, Ichia-sama, but won't you settle down a bit?" Another voice came from above. "We could have floated down with my wind magic, you know, Ichia-san." An irritated voice said, "It's been a while, everyone." A third voice could be heard next, this one softer than the previous three. The three men landed on the ground gracefully, revealing themselves to be Blue Pegasus' famous Triman, Hibiki, Ren, and Eve. "Why is Blue Pegasus here?" Jet asked in total confusion, but ignoring his question, the Triman gathered around Lackey, currently the only female fairy mage at the guild, and started flirting with her. "You are as beautiful as ever, Lackey-san," Hibiki said as he stroked the lavender-headed girl's hair. "Those glasses, it really suits you," Ren said with a small blush, adding another compliment. "Oh, thank you," she said nervously, unable to find any better response. "Could you guys quit flirting and tells us why you're here?" Max cried loudly. "Stop that right now, men." Ichia stepped in after rising to his feet. "Please excuse us," the Triman said in unison as they bowed their heads at Lackey. "Please forgive us." "Why are you even here?" Warren asked. "We've done it," Ichia said, dusting himself off and walking out of the crater. "Something matching Christina's movement characteristics that we've recorded in the information archives has been detected in Fiore's Ethernano reading," Hibiki began with a small smile. "Which means that," Ichia said emphatically as he pointed his hands forward, "Tenrou Island still exists." All of Fairy Tail's members could only stand there in shock at the news, while several miles away, a certain immortal blonde woke up from his sleep when he felt a something he had been too familiar with. "It's time, Naruto said as he removed himself from the woman sleeping next to him and stood up from his bed. Moving toward the window, the blonde grabbed the curtain and gently moved them to the sides just a little, so it would only give him just enough room to look at the world outside but not wide enough to allow the sunlight to slip in and ruin his lover's sleep. 7 years. It had been 7 years since the day he kicked Tenrou into the ocean. He would never admit it or say it out loud, but he had to give Mavis and her brats some credit, because of the amount of magical power that was covered. Their bonds and faiths in each other was simply outstanding. Even he couldn't have done it any better. "Master, what's wrong?" A smile made its way to his face when he turned his head around and saw Sayla sitting on their bed with the cover only hid her body from the waist down, leaving the entire of her upper body to his view. "Did I wake you up?" Naruto asked when the beautiful demon yawned sleepily and rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand. He had always enjoyed a good sleep, but unlike her and human, he didn't need to sleep all that much, so even after having with her all night till 7 in the morning, he felt completely fine. "No, master." Sayla shook her head and stood up from the bed as well, letting the cover fall off her body. She made her way toward him before wrapping her hands around his torso and pressed her body against his. Because he was much taller than her head could only rest against his chest. "Is something bothering you, master?" "It's not anything like that." Naruto shook his head and wrapped his arms around her when she moved her head back slightly to look at him. "Can you stay here for a while? There's something I need to do." "Yes, master." Sayla smiled, nodding her head, "But please return as soon as you can. I would be very lonely without you." "Is that a demand?" "It's a request, master." Sayla giggled and at the same time, Naruto laughed softly before lowering his head down to kiss her softly on the lips. Letting go of her, Naruto turned around and picked up his clothes, which had been scattered all around the room by Sayla the night before. Putting them on, Naruto turned to look at Sayla and saw her doing the same to herself, putting on her black kimono. The previous kimono had been destroyed by him 7 years ago, but the current one was no less revealing, and placing the bandana on the top of her head to move the bands of her face away from her face. "Make breakfast if you can. This shouldn't take too long," Naruto said as he put on his jacket and disappeared in a flash of light. Sayla stared at the spot he was just standing a moment ago with a troubled expression. Did he forget that she didn't know how to cook? With a smile on her face, Mavis Vermilion outstretched her arms to the sides and allowed the holy land of fairy tale, Tenrujima, wrapped inside the glowing golden fairy sphere, re-emerged from the bottom of the ocean, shocking everyone who was watching from a ship not too far from her. After gesturing them to follow her with her hand, Mavis turned around and flew away. Fairy Tale's wizards landed their ship on the beach and tried their best to catch up to her, but she was simply floating away too fast for any of them to follow. Soon enough, she disappeared from view, but when the group tried to search for the girl, they were able to find something, or rather someone with a familiar mop of pink hair buried under the dirt. "Natsu," Max said while the rest gasped in shock. As quickly as he could, he ran as fast as he could and got to the Fire Dragon Slayer's side. After giving a quick check to make sure that he was still alive and breathing, he grabbed his shoulder, while Jet and Droid tried to pull him from the ground. "Natsu, get a hold of yourself. Wake up, your bastard," Warren cried out. "What? Shut up." Natsu roared and busted himself of the ground, ready to fight. "Natsu, wahh, Jet." Warren and Droid cried and threw themselves at him with their arms wrapped tightly around Natsu's neck, bringing him into a giant bear hug much to his shock. From afar, Mavis watched. The smile had never left her face. Any last word? But the next second, the first master of Fairy Tale flinched and forced a smile to her smile when she heard his voice and felt something pointy touched the back of her neck, which shouldn't be possible because she was a ghost and anything that wasn't spiritual would simply pass through her. But still, she knew all too well that only he was capable of doing something like that. "It's been a while, brat. Eep." The blonde squealed in shock when she was grabbed by the back of her dress and lifted into the air. "He put me down, Naruto. I thought we have already gotten over this." She whined childishly while swinging her arms around when she came face to face with him. "You have gotten over this, I, meanwhile, haven't." He twisted the kunai around and flicked her nose with the curve end of the ring, causing her to pout and puff her cheek out in annoyance. "Cheeky brat. Do I have to remind you once again that this is my island? But I was born here." She crossed her arms over her chest and stated clearly. "Excuse me, but did it make Tenrou your island?" he asked, with a deadpanned expression, but Mavis only stuck her tongue at him. Naruto then dropped Mavis much to her surprise, causing her to land on her butt. All right, brat, I will give you 2 minutes. You get those people off my island, or I will do it myself. All right, geez, there is no need to be such a jerk. Mavis stood up while rubbing her butt. At least give me a few more minutes to properly greet them. Speaking of which, why don't you come with me? No, Naruto stated coldly. What about Urza? Don't you want to meet her again after all this time? 2 minutes, no more. Putting his hands into his pockets, Naruto responded with the same tone, looking away with a blank bored look on his face. Jerk, brat, heartless bastard, midget, asshole. Is she trying to mimic Zera? Naruto thought before smirking. Do you even know what that word means? Are you really questioning my intellect? Mavis pouted as she crossed her arms over her chest. Time to move, the clock is ticking. She saw him waving his hand dismissively, urging her to do it as fast as she could. However, the moment she turned her head back, a quick plan formed in her head. She smirked evilly. When the lost members of Fairy Tail had been awakened, Mavis stepped forward and cleared her throat, making herself known to everyone. Hello everyone. She greeted them softly with a warm smile on her face. I'm very happy to finally meet all of you for the first time. My name is Mavis, Fairy Tail's first master, Mavis Vermilion. She introduced, causing Fairy Tail, save for the current master, to cry out in shock. How? Urza said in surprise, looking at the first master with wide eyes, much like everyone else. I've passed away a long time ago, so this is just an ethereal body. She responded, closing her eyes. Back then, I took the strength of everyone's bonds and faith and converted all of it into magical power. All of your thoughts allowed one of the 3 great fairy magic, Fairy Sphere, to be activated. It's an absolute defensive magic that will protect the guild from any evil. However, everyone was sealed in a frozen state. Though it's been released, a span of 7 years has passed. They all gasped. It was the 7 years of nothing. What now? So it was the first who protected us? Makarov said between tears, grinning at the young woman with long golden hair. It's nothing. Since I converted everyone's strength into magic, I had to give it my all. Mavis smiled. Unwavering faith and resilient bonds will bring even miracles to your side. She then looked at them and smiled with her head tilted to the side. It's becoming a wonderful guild, third. It truly is, Mavis-sama. Makarov smiled back at her, and everyone all nodded their heads in agreement. Meanwhile, Naruto was checking the time. It had been 2 minutes and 10 seconds. It's time for him to kick them out of his island. He had plenty ninjutsu to wash them out of his island, but a tropical storm should be more than enough. Before you go, there's someone I would like to introduce to you all. Mavis suddenly said, causing Naruto to stop channeling his chakra. While I was the one who created Fairy Sphere, he made sure you're all safe from Agnologia. Mavis continued brightly, too brightly, his name is Naruto Uzumaki, and he is, but before she could finish her introduction, Naruto appeared right next to her and slammed his right fist into the top of her head. There, happy now? Naruto asked in annoyance as he glared at Mavis, who held her head with both hands, tears threatening to fall from her eyes. With a sigh, he turned his head and looked at the members of Fairy Tail, who were staring at him with wide eyes. With a quick scan, he was able to remember all of their faces, and the rest of their facial appearances, something he ignored 7 years ago in favor of their battles. His attention shifted to Natsu for a second time, before stopping at Urza. Urza almost flinched. She could swear that he, Naruto Uzumaki, was looking right at her. She believed they had never met before in the past, and yet Urza Scarlet could feel something very familiar about him. Oddly enough, she felt warm when she looked back at him. He gave her the warm and heartfelt feelings of the people who had taken care of her and shaped her into the woman she was now for the past 19 years, and she wasn't thinking about Makarov. Sure, he had been nothing but a grandfather to her ever since she joined Fairy Tail, but it was the people who came before him, before she joined Fairy Tail that gave her all those feelings. He also looked a lot like someone she used to know. Ahem. Naruto cleared his throat to break the silence before saying, since this midget has already spilt the bean, you guys have already known my name, but I think a proper introduction must be included. He pointed at Mavis, before putting both hands behind his back. My name is Naruto Uzumaki and I'm a member of Fairy Tail, the owner of this island. The immortal shinobi and the first master of Fairy Tail finished his introduction at the same time, causing everyone to gasp in surprise. Naruto turned his head slightly to the side and glared at Mavis, who stuck her tongue out at him before grinning brightly. What do you mean when you said you were the owner of this island? Makarov was the first person to ask, isn't Tenrou, Mavis home? But my ancestor had been here even before her. We're the owner of this land before you people come here and lay waste to it. It's our birthright, Naruto replied blankly, lying straight through his teeth. However, his statement wasn't completely untruthful, because his ancestor had been there before her, and even before him. Is he telling the truth, Master Mavis? Mira asked. Naruto turned to look at the girl in question and silently promised her unimaginable pain and humiliation if she dared to spill the whole truth. Yes, he is. Mavis Vermilion nodded. Hold on, you're a Fairy Tail's mage. Laxus decided to ask after that. He was the oldest member of the current younger generation and yet he'd never seen Naruto before, and he didn't look any older than him, but I'd never seen you joining our guild before. I have been staying here for most of my life, Naruto said shortly. But, for most of my life, Naruto repeated, interrupting the lightning dragon slayer with the same tone. Speaking of which, the livings are unwelcomed here, so I will give you 30 seconds to climb on that ship. He pointed his hand at the direction of the ship on the beach, and move your SS off my island before I do the walking for you. He sounds like Perliuzica, Natsu exclaimed. If you are comparing me to some old coot, Naruto put his hands together and formed a hand seal, something that didn't go unnoticed by a certain redhead, immediately making the sky darken with lightning cracking violently on the clouds, causing Fairy Tail to look on in shock. Then shall I guarantee you that I am nothing like this, Perliuzica. Whoa, how is he doing that? Natsu said as he looked at the sky. That's awesome. Kya, that's not awesome. Lucy cried when one of the bolts of lightning struck the spot beside her. Let's get out of here. Yes, I think it's time for us to leave. Makarov nodded and was about to continue but stopped when he saw Urza raising her hand to stop them. Please hold on a second, Master. Urza said as she stepped forward. I want to ask him a few questions. Naruto raised an eyebrow, but he didn't say anything. Standing beside him, Mavis was smiling. It turned out better than she thought. Have we met before? No, we have never met in person. So, are you familiar with Minato Namikaze? Everyone turned her head to look at Urza after that. He's my father. The immortal shinobi answered truthfully, causing Urza to widen her eyes in surprise. Really? You're his son? Naruto shrugged his shoulders. I didn't know. You probably didn't. Naruto replied. What was he to you? He was my teacher, the one who taught me requip magic, Urza answered, and the rest of Fairy Tail couldn't help but gasp. It was a story she had never shared with anyone. He also taught me everything I know, and showed me the way of my magic. He was like a father to me. Well, that explained it. Naruto crossed his arms on his chest. He might be a great guy to his student, but he's not much of a father to his own child. That was particularly true, in more way than one. You know that is not true. You want to argue with me? Naruto asked, glaring at her. He was an SS, I tell you. He was my teacher, someone I could call my father. Urza summoned her sword and pointed it at him. I won't stand it if you continue to badmouth him like that. She growled and Naruto rolled his eyes. All right, please calm down Urza. Realizing the tense atmosphere between the two, Mira stepped in front of her best friend and put her hand on her shoulders and said to her, hoping to calm Urza down, we will leave your island immediately. Mira turned around and smiled to Naruto, please excuse us. She tried to push her away, but Urza refused to move and continued to glare at Naruto. When the fairy tale's mages started to move, they were stopped and it was Mavis who did that. Hold on. Mavis stepped forward and turned around to face Naruto, holding her hands behind her back. Naruto. What? Naruto didn't like the smile on Mavis' face. It promised troubles for him. Why don't you come with them? Excuse me, you're a member of Fairy Tail, right? Since when did he become a member of Fairy Tail? Why don't you try the life as one of its members for the first time? Naruto was about to answer without taking a second to think of a response, but Mavis beat him to it by continuing, I promise you it's going to be very fun. She then clapped her hands together and gave him the infamous big puppy dog eyes, something that combined with her cuteness, was overkill even for someone like him. Please Naruto, do it for me, just this time. What do you say Naruto, would you like to come with us? Master Makarov asked with a grin, you're a member of Fairy Tail. What more, you seem like a good friend of the first. We would be more than happy to take you in as an official member. He completely ignored Makarov's words. Okay fine, Naruto said finally and flicked Mavis on the forehead, knocking her down to her butt, but the spirit of the first master of Fairy Tail smiled brightly nonetheless. Most likely Salis breakfast would have to be eaten by his clone because he couldn't think of any better option.